the government, the stability of commerce, everything went out the window. And for 500 years we fall into the dark ages. Plagues, pestilence, famines. Slowly people come out of it during the Middle Ages. And they begin to find their own identity, they begin to reassert their own governments, their own rule. We move into the Renaissance, this rebirth of knowledge finally, and quickly move into the age of enlightenment. We call this clockwork science. Science finally sheds religion and starts looking at things from cause and effect, from logic, from a way to look at the world that gives us an understanding that we didn't have before, and then finally we move into the modern age. When an empire falls, one of the patterns of dissolving the empire is to get rid of every vestige of control, any influence they had. When Alexandria in England and Egypt fell, they destroyed probably the greatest library the world has ever seen. We find little fragments of papyrus notes, and we think they're referring to something called cancer, and they had natural cures for it. We have no idea what it's about. They just eradicated every vestige of that empire. And the same thing happened with Rome, except, and this will get us into traditional sexual morality, except the Catholic Church became the repository of all Roman knowledge, or all the knowledge that Rome had accumulated. It's not a religious concept. They just became a repository of all known knowledge that the Western world had accumulated under Rome. It's still there today. Those archives still exist because knowledge is power, and they understood that knowledge was important. So they became the repository, or the holding place of this knowledge. Ptolemy is a Greek mathematician and kind of a scientist. He does math one day, and he realizes through his mathematical inquiry that the Earth is the center of the universe. And his math is still good. The only problem with it is the Earth isn't the center of the universe. Later, Copernicus comes along. He redoes the math. In philosophy, we have this thing called Occam's razor. If you have two solutions to the same problem, the simpler solution's usually right. He simplifies the math, and he says Ptolemy had it right. The Earth is not the center of the solar system. The sun is. It's called heliocentric way of looking at things. Helio, a Latin word for sun. Okay? Both maths work. Turns out Copernicus' math, we think today, is the better math. Galileo comes on a little later, and he agrees with it. The problem is we have Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation, and there's a conflict now. And the conflict is what you believe in. And Luther said there's no way the sun is the center of the universe. It's got to be the Earth. Why would he say that? Anybody want to take a guess? You can't be wrong. Go ahead.
Because he was a religious man.
Flush it out more. That's correct. And what was his reference point?
If the Earth was the center of the universe, then I guess I guess it said that that's what the Pope and everyone believed. I guess I forgot.
That's okay. Flush it out. Come on. You're all on the right track.
If he's religious and like the Bible says that God created the earth and all this other.
The heavens and the earth. So we interpret from that the earth must be the centerpiece of creation. So of course the earth must be the center of the universe, the whole center of creation. So to suggest that it wasn't is to come into conflict with the accepted knowledge of the time. Who controlled the accepted knowledge of the time? Church did. You had a right to. They control the knowledge of the time. Look, we go through changes in knowledge, people. We go through different eras and different times. We go, oh, that wasn't right. Look, Newton was right. We live in a three-dimensional universe. Up, down, left, right, back, forward. The only problem is he was wrong. We live in a four-dimensional universe. Einstein showed us that. There's glue that holds those three together. It's called time. So Einstein says we live in a space-time continuum. Then another German philosopher named Theodor Kaluza came by and he said, you should have developed your math more. He says there's 10 physical dimensions and they're all glued together with time. And everybody says, well, where are they? We can only see three. Height, depth, and Kaluza says, oh, well, we're not hardwired to see it. You ever see pictures from the Hubble telescope? You and I cannot see that. We cannot see the red shift and the blue shift. We have the technology to see that now. We can see gamma rays. We can see things we didn't even know existed out there. We're not hardwired, Kaluza says, to see the other 7 dimensions. Gives rise to what we call string theory. You want to know about this, you come to my intro class in multiverses, and I will just bend your minds. And Kaluza's not right either. He's just got us as far as we can go. So, Ptolemy got us so far, Copernicus, Galileo, but we ran into headwinds. It happened to be with the Catholic Church. He who controls knowledge controls power. In the 60s, it was, I forget his name. Perception is everything. He who controls perception controls what you think and what you know. So we have ideologies. It's called gun tunnel vision. If you look through this one, you only see one thing. If you look through this one, Marshall McLuhan, you only see one thing, you only see another thing. He controls perception, controls everything. Same thing with knowledge. He who controls knowledge. So these guys are in conflict with the known knowledge at the time. Now, clockwork science has since expanded, and like I said, if you want more of that, we can get into intro. Now, why is this important to us? Because the church was the repository of all known knowledge at the time. Part of that knowledge turns out to be Aristotle. Aristotle is the foundation. Aristotle is the foundation of the traditional sexual morality. Now, get this right from the beginning. Aristotle did not invent traditional sexual morality. Aristotle talked about nature, and he made some observations, 4 important observations about nature. The church took these observations and tailored them into what we now call traditional sexual morality. But Aristotle did not invent traditional sexual morality. He's talking about his idea of nature. Now, the Catholic morality was influenced by Aristotle, and also by a fellow named St. Thomas Aquinas, but it was not invented by them. What did Aristotle say? He said nature has 4 important ideas for us to look at. Number 1, everything in nature has a purpose. If I was to ask you, what is the most fundamental purpose of everything in nature? Everything that lives in nature, what is the most fundamental purpose of everything in nature?
It's to reproduce.
Reproduction. One species doesn't reproduce for 1 generation, it ceases to exist. Okay? So Aristotle's saying that the most fundamental nature or purpose of everything in nature is to reproduce, is reproduction. Without reproduction, you don't have the next generation, you die off instantly. Therefore, everything in nature has an essential nature, that is, certain features that constitute its defining features. Now, you're all adults here, so what are the defining features in nature that apply to reproduction?
Well, for most of us, you need 2 to break 1.
You need 2, okay? Well, for all of them, you need 2. Well, every once in a while you hear, yeah, okay, but let's just say 2. Let's go with the 2. But what are the defining features? Let's take human beings. What are the defining features of human beings that allow us to procreate? The essential defining features. Yeah, your sex organs. If they don't fit together the right way, they don't work in harmony with one another. You're all adults here. Well, Aristotle's right on the mark. Nature has a way of reproducing after its own kind. Some deposit seed, some lay seed on top of things, some excite people, and certain things happen inside their chemistry. But without that participation between a male part of the species and a female part, you cannot have procreation. Everybody with me? Okay. This isn't rocket science. He's just pointing out what's natural. Therefore, everything in nature has a proper good. In other words, if you don't put your parts together, they can't work together. They can work without going together, but they work much better when it comes to procreation when you put your parts together. And if you don't put your parts together, you can't get procreation. And if you don't have procreation, you terminate the life of the species. Isn't that simple? Help me out, people. I know it's the middle of the semester now. Aristotle was just pointing out what's obvious. Nature requires cooperation between both genders of a species. However you reproduce, stamens, pistils, whether you have penises, vaginas, it doesn't matter. If you don't have the interrelation of the 2, you don't have reproduction. Therefore, the 4th point is just the first 3 together. Something's natural purpose, its essential nature, and its proper good are intimately related. Obviously, that's true. That's the foundation of traditional sexual morality. There's a moral obligation to reproduce the species. It's a natural urge without which we would die off within a generation if we all decided to be celibate or to go out to the desert and not encounter any other people of the opposite species. Okay? With me? Okay. Now in 1976, the Vatican, having known this, has taken the natural essence that Aristotle talked about, and it has now raised it to the level of sexual morality. What is our moral obligation then to the species and to one another? He says the essential characteristic of human beings is the ability to engage in fully human love. This isn't just intercourse now, this is fully human love. Animals mate. But people have a greater capacity. Yes, we mate. If we don't mate, we don't reproduce. But human beings have a greater capacity, and they call that to engage in fully human love. Genuine caring, sincerity, respect, commitment, and fidelity. So these are our talking points for the next couple of minutes. I'm curious. How many of you believe that genuine caring is important in any relationship you have? What would genuine caring be? What does it mean to be genuine caring?
Well, let's say if you have a spouse or someone you're with would be like checking up on them, making sure they're okay and all that. Like pretty much like, are they all right in their lives? Like, because you have to be part of their life.
So, compassion, empathy, relatability. Worrying about them. Not necessarily a negative worrying, but being concerned that their welfare is okay. Go ahead.
Well, if your partner is sick, I mean, you can go ahead and can care to make sure that they're getting better.
I just found out a friend of mine has got blood leukemia. Never knew that. Just happened to sit down with her and chat about it. Now we've exchanged. Yeah.
I was just going to say, fulfilling the needs of the other person.
So I have this friend, just graduated, an older gentleman that I know, happens to be gay, was in a relationship with a gentleman, and a job opportunity came up outside the States. And they talked about it for a long time. I mean, they're committed to one another. They talked about it for a long time. And they decided that it was in the best interest of this friend of mine that he pursue this other career outside the States, this job. And so he went. They had agreed upon it. You know, when couples agree on something, you can do that. I know couples that don't live together, they're agreed that they need this, you know, not that they don't love one another and don't ever, a job's up over here, the other one can't leave their job, and they just work out the differences. So he goes to Hawaii. And while he's there, a couple of years later, his partner develops cancer, stage 4 cancer. And what this friend did was just amazing. He decided to leave. It's a $100,000 a year job. He left this job, and he went back, and he took care of his partner till he died. My dad and I, how do I say? I've said I have a fraternal twin, right? I've never said I have a fraternal twin. You know what fraternal twins are? 2 eggs in the womb, 2 different eggs. He got the defective egg. Yeah, he's just... But he fulfilled the family's dreams. He left high school anyway, he became a banker for Chase Manhattan, way up there, making great money, and I went that way. And when I came to my senses, I came back this way. And so my dad and I never had we didn't have a hateful relationship, we just didn't have one. You know, it's like you just don't have one. Like you call home and 50 seconds later, why don't you put mom on the phone? We talk for 10 or 20 minutes. Okay. So my mom passes on January 8th of 2001, and my father, for the first time in my life, looks at me in tears.